What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the framework. This is our Tuesday episode, or technically our Wednesday episode, whenever it gets out. As always, I am your host, Ryan Fitzgerald, my co-host, Mike McKenzie. What's up, man?
What's up? What's up?
So we took last week off because of some scheduling conflicts, but we're back, man.
Yeah.
I have a secondary series going on, which is way more bodybuilding focused. This is more kind of become lifestyle. So I have my good friend Todd Lyons, where we do line and the physique. So the framework is going to be talking a lot more about kind of lifestyle stuff and the balance of fitness and every day and some things that we see in the gym, things that we see outside of the gym, whereas those other episodes are going to almost be 99.9% bodybuilding focused. So what's up, man? How you been?
Yeah, I've been pretty good. It's like time's flying. Like the fact that it's been 2 weeks since the last time we talked,
Yeah.
like halfway through May. But I'm not mad about it. I'm just enjoying the nice weather.
How's training going?
Training's actually going pretty well for the first time in a while. As funny as it sounds to say that, so it's kind of been keeping me going. Like my goals have kind of evolved a little bit, and I've been able to kind of have a good headspace with my training instead of like kind of putting all my eggs into that basket of where my progress is and letting that dictate. You know what I mean? I feel like that's kind of like a trap that we all fall into. Like how your day ends up being is like if you end up starting your day with a bad training session and all of a sudden you're like, oh, my whole day is kind of
Yeah.
off. But
How do you determine when you're going to train at home versus when you're going to go to like a commercial gym or when you go to?
yeah. Um, I mean, for me right now, to be completely honest, like it all depends on my schedule with my daughter, because gyms like have no childcare anymore.
No.
So, which is kind of crazy, you know. Mainly just depends on my schedule with her. But also like where I'm at in my training week. Like I do my primary days at my girlfriend's house just because she has all of my equipment there. We have our barbell, we have squat rack, so I can do my primary days there. And then the later days in the week, I like to do at a gym because I have more access to like machines, more stuff for accessories, which tends to look a little bit more like bodybuilding esque in terms of training, like higher volume, more things to help just grow. So really just schedule where I'm at.
Yeah, I love that I have the dungeon and I have,
Yeah.
every piece that I could possibly need down there. Sometimes I need to change it up. Sometimes I just kind of need the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of like the question, somebody actually asked me the same thing. It's like, dude, why would you ever go to a gym when you
Yeah.
have, what you have at home? And you've seen it. You've trained with me a
Yeah,
number
of
of times.
course.
So um
You have a good setup.
I always like I'm always like, yeah, but maybe sometimes I just need, the atmosphere. And then I always regret it. I can go to my local gym or a commercial gym 2 3 days in a row, maybe for half my first
Yeah,
and half of the week split. I just think that like proper gym etiquette is dead.
I agree. I agree.
Maybe it's changing, but in my opinion, it's dead. And I feel like that's such an old head thing to say, like, oh, the next generation of lifters, like they don't know what they're doing in here. But like I know because like to my point, like you train a little bit of
Mhm.
both as I do. So like do you see that happening where you guys train, whether it be in a
Yeah.
lifting focused gym or um any bodybuilder gym?
You definitely do. I mean, whether it's a powerlifting focused gym, CrossFit gym, or bodybuilding gym, like you're gonna see the people that kind of are the outliers where they don't take care of the equipment, they leave stuff everywhere, and it's unfortunate because like I'm torn. Like I agree with you. Like it's nice having a home setup. Every now and then though, it's nice to have like that like extrinsic kind of energy. Like sometimes like having a bunch of people around you, like especially like with like a primary day from doing like a heavy set. Like it does help a lot having like a group of people there to kind of set like a tone, set the energy because it's hard to kind of sometimes get yourself motivated when you just have like,
Sure.
you could let me walk upstairs and go sit on the couch and I ate another snack. Here's 10 minutes between my set. So, but a lot of times though, man, like people just like leave plates everywhere, and like at bodybuilding gyms, I mean not bodybuilding, like powerlifting gyms, like people just like sometimes don't even clean up their chalk, like there's chalk everywhere, and like especially with like a lot of the specialty bars for powerlifting, like they're very expensive, like 400 or 500 bars, sometimes almost $1,000 for a bar, and people don't take care of them. Like they get rusted, they get like chalk caked in them, and it's annoying because like you have people who like they just pay their 40 or 50 bucks a month and don't know how expensive the equipment they're kind of just messing up is. So that's more
think
frustrating.
I think one of my biggest pet peeves and the easiest one to point out is like the tripods, right? Like now every gym, there are gyms now that I walk into because I like to travel and,
Yeah.
and check out different gyms as much as I can. When I'm on the kick where I want to get out of the home gym,
Mhm.
I'll kind of bounce around.
Yeah.
Now these gyms have like multiple tripods, but like their own. Like you'll see them like labeled like gym tripod. So that was kind of
Yeah.
weird, I guess, to see. There are certain local gyms where like a group of three people walk in, two of them are there to lift, and the other guy's in jeans and a hoodie, and he's just there to film.
Yeah.
I think that's very weird. But like, I mean, that is what it is. That's kind of become like the mainstream thing now. Everybody's filming for their 500 followers on social media. Um, I think the gym etiquette that bothers me is like when I was 17 or 18 going into the gym and I saw somebody benching 315 for, multiple reps, or, the guy who was deadlifting, 405 plus, and the bigger dudes, like I had so much respect for those guys. Like to me, if you were just a big guy in the gym, you were a professional bodybuilder. Like
Yeah.
I just assumed this guy's been there, done that. He's chasing the Ronnie Colemans and the Jay Cutlers of the world. I want to be like that guy.
Yeah.
And there was just so much respect. And like I would always kind of go up and I have no shame in this. I used to train at a super gym in Jackson. And I would go up to a big guy and be like, hey man, do you mind if I work in? Now, this guy might be 250, 260. I was like 130 pounds.
Yeah.
So that guy had every right to be like, absolutely not. I'm not taking all this weight off the machine so that you can jump in, beat it. But
Hmm.
a lot of the times, man, they were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, what are you looking to train? Okay. Like, and then I would do the movement and they'd be like, where do you feel? I vividly remember a time where I was doing like the shoulder press. I don't remember the brand, but it was like it crossed behind you. So like the shoulder
Yeah.
press kind of moved like this.
Yep.
I remember like I was like, oh, just overthinking it, like trying to make it go in the direction that it's
Mhm.
supposed to. And this guy's like, okay, like, do you feel it here? Okay, relax, like, move your elbows forward and stuff. And like
Yeah.
to this day, I'm like, I have performed the shoulder press to absolute perfection because of that one day when I was 17 years old. Whereas like nowadays, like kids will just come up and like put their bag by your feet.
Hmm.
And you're like, yeah.
Um,
Like I don't usually wear headphones in the gym. So like I'll be like, you okay? Like you lost? And I don't mean that like meanly, but like
no, like
gym bag
like
sitting
if
against my foot.
something like
And this kid will be like, oh yeah. You mind if I work in? I'm gonna work in. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't mind you working in, but like there's gotta be some level of communication. Um, or you get to people where like universally, like standing in front of the dumbbell rack, like
mhm.
that's kind of always been a thing. Um,
Always, I probably say that irks me the most because sometimes you're like doing a set and you have to sit there for like 5 minutes before you can put your stuff away.
yeah, or like if you're flat dumbbell benching and like you go to
Horrible.
sit up with like the 110s and somebody's doing, dumbbell curls with the 25s, and you're like, now I have to sit here with all this weight on my legs. My shoulders are awkward and tight from just, benching, and now I got to just wait for you to get out of my way. Uh,
Yeah.
I think the other thing has got to be the cell phones. And I know that like the things that we're touching on are like, what are you gonna do? Like that's just how it is in the gym now. Like
Yeah.
if there's a crowded commercial gym, people are gonna want to work in with you. People have been working out in front of the dumbbell rack forever. People have been leaving chalk on the floor forever. But I think like it almost doesn't even affect me. But if you're walking around the gym on a FaceTime, or you're walking around in a phone conversation to the point where like you're resting it on your leg while you're doing pull downs or something, like how are you dialed in to your sets and how
Yep.
are you focused on your workouts when you're taking a call?
Yep. No, I agree. And it's a fine line. Like I think it's cool that on the devil's advocate side of it, like I think it's cool that social media and like everything has kind of reduced the barrier of entry to like getting into like fitness, because I do agree, because you and I kind of got into the gym, like we're around similar ages. So like we got into everything around the same age, and you at least had like the forums online, and then you kind of just like got an issue of a magazine, and you went to the gym and literally just like tried things out, and then
Yeah.
you picked people's brains, and there was no like constantly being bombarded with like this perfectionism that like social media has. So like there's that end of the spectrum, but then at the same time it also breeds kind of like what you were saying. Like there's a difference between having access to tons of information, being excited, and like because a lot of people thrive off the community of the gym, which is what we always loved. Look at the throwback like old school retro days. Like half of us didn't always know what we were doing, but like we all went at the same times. Half of us got food at the same time, so like we loved the atmosphere. So that's why a lot of people love the social media side of it, because it gives you that without having to actually physically have it in person. But then at the same time, it brings kind of like what you said. There's people who just they don't have that common sense, where it's just becoming more of an entitlement, like, oh, you have to let me work in with you, or you have to let me do this because my social media is fitness. And if I don't post a training session today or post something today, like it's all gonna be for waste. And then you have kids like that, like they just throw their bags at your feet and they're kind of like, no, you're working in with me. And I
Yeah.
think that's just a lot of just so many more people are coming into the space. You start getting all those outliers where kids are just assholes, man.
I don't know if it's always 100% of the time, like I have to set up my tripod and record this. This is the
No.
exercise I'm doing. But I think social media plays such a huge role in the sense of like, this is just a busy gym. This is
Mhm.
what I see other people doing online and on YouTube's. And well, my favorite influencer never has to wait for, a squat rack. So I'm not going to wait for a squat rack. Like I see these people walk into the gym and like somebody could have their bag and a water bottle or whatever the case may be on a bench. And like they'll move your stuff and just take it. Whereas like I feel like, 15 years ago, there was like a level of respect in the gym that just does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I can't pinpoint like what it stems from. It's just there. And I don't want to say like, oh, this is the new breed of lifters. Like these are all these young kids coming in, but like I almost feel like, did we allow it? Or is it just the way of the world? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think kind of piggybacking off that, I feel like it is a lot of the way of the world. Like I'm noticing that more just like in general, like
The
coming from,
entitlement aspect.
yeah, I mean, like in a previous life worked customer service and a social media job. And, I worked customer service for, almost 2 decades. And like just even seeing the transition from almost 2 decades ago into like recently within the last like 5 years, not even 5 years, like 3, 4, 5 years, like just the way people act, so it just bleeds into the gym too, which is unfortunate, because a lot of times like the gym is like the only escape you have from all those other external things. It's just more of a frustration.
So we kind of touched on a few different things that are like, this is gym etiquette that people are lacking,
Yeah.
maybe on purpose or,
Mhm.
subconsciously. They just don't realize they're doing it, right? You're being a jackass and,
Literally.
I also think there's a level of like gym etiquette that lacks and with good purpose. So for example, like they mean well. So if you're supersetting
Mhm.
and you are taking up a bench and a large area next to you and a multiple set of dumbbells, like I can respect that. You're
Yeah.
getting supersets, drop sets, you're learning new things, but there has to be like, oh yeah, like there can't always be like I'm using that.
Yep.
Do you run into that a lot with powerlifting? Because I feel
Yeah.
like obviously any gym you go to, regardless, there's only so many squat racks, there's only so many deadlifting platforms, there's only so many of the, this barbell works better for deadlifts than this one.
Yep.
Whereas in like a commercial gym, it's like there's only 2 lat pull downs.
Yep.
Figure it out. Like fist fight over it if you have to.
No, I mean, definitely yes. When it comes to like the bodybuilding stuff, I totally agree with you because there's only so much equipment when you have people who kind of tag team equipment. With like the powerlifting side of it, I mean, the federation I compete in, like luckily for squat, bench, and deadlift, they use the same bar for all 3 lifts. Like there's no deadlift bars or anything like that. So at least you know what bars you're going to use, and for the most part, most powerlifting gyms are going to have a plethora of them. Like the gym I go to has like 10 to 15 of them, so you never really have to worry about bars. I would say what people end up making very territorial is they, instead of like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like a combo rack.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you could have 5 different people working on a combo rack. You can quickly change the rack heights and everything. You don't have to stress over it, but people still tend to not share combo racks with people who are training around the same weights. You could have 5 combo racks with 5 kids, and they're all training each on their own, squatting around the same weight, and they don't want anyone to work in with them because they're going to take the plates off, kind of like what you were talking about with the other guy in the gym, and they're going to have to change the rack heights. And I feel like that becomes like a thing too, is people just, they like to have their own equipment, forgetting that it's also still a public space. And
Like you like your own space.
yeah,
Of
yeah, and it's like it's like cool, like you're getting after it, kind of like you said, like you're respecting it, they're training, but like if you're gonna do that, at least let people work in with you or share the equipment with you, because then it becomes kind of like what you were saying, that it just becomes more of an annoyance. So it's like they mean well, but it's still an improper gym etiquette. It's more, it's like share the equipment, man.
Yeah, and I feel like I see kind of those things that we touched on with kind of the younger audience and kind of the people who are, mid-level to, to our point about, what you're doing, you're kind of leveling up in your fitness game or your, sport of choice. But I also see almost like an ego with the older generation, kind of the ones that came not necessarily
Mm,
right before us, but even before that generation, talking that 40 to 60 demographic,
yeah.
where it's like, well, I've been there, done that. I think the biggest thing we all get right is when I was your age, when I started lifting,
Yeah.
I was about 40 pounds heavier than you. It's
And
like, well,
eventually
prove it.
beat that somehow.
It's 2023. I can Google you. Prove it. Do you now? Obviously, it's so prominent in bodybuilding with
Yeah.
people like there's, they're using squat machines with 25s on each side, but will
Mhm.
come up to you and tell you they used to rep 405 and they, oh, I barbell back squatted, 585 for 12 reps and I won the Pennsylvania State powerlifting
Mhm.
medal back in
Yeah.
1993. You can't Google me because it was unofficial, but I did it. I had multiple. I hold the record for raw deadlift in Delaware. You can't Google me
Is in
because
my backyard.
yeah. You can't look me up because
Yep.
it wasn't a qualifier, so you'll never find me on any of those things. That shit always drives me insane. Do you see that a lot with powerlifting? Because obviously bodybuilders see it left and right.
No, of course. I mean, I think the cool thing about powerlifting is that a lot of like masters competitors have like for instance, there's a guy Dave Ricks who like recently broke one of the squat records like within the last 5 years,
Awesome.
and like he's like in his 60s, and like there's so many, like the community gets along relatively pretty well in terms of the age demographics. You have your outliers, of course. I would say I see it more just in the regular gym atmosphere though. Like at meets, you don't really see it. That's the cool thing. But like in the regular gym atmosphere, like if you're training at like a commercial gym or whatnot, you start having the people who just come up to you. And like I remember when I was training at Central State, remember,
Yeah.
and I would have people that would come up to me all the time, and they're like, "Oh, you better be careful." Like I used to squat about 400 pounds more than what you're squatting now, and now my knees are bothering me. So
Oh, the
please
worst.
take it. Please take it from me because you're going to be in a wheelchair in 5 to 10 years. You get that. I get that a lot, especially like when I'm getting closer to a meet and I'm training like for me, like training heavier. People just we'll come like, oh, like, don't do that. You know, you're gonna hurt your shoulder. You're gonna hurt your back. Oh, don't do deadlifts. Don't do this. Don't do this.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like I see that all the time. I mean, like,
That's great.
you listen, we all have aches and pains, right? When we were in our early 20s, we never thought that we would be those guys.
Mm,
You touched on master classes,
yeah.
and I want to go off on a bit of a tangent of my own, from a bodybuilding perspective, from a competitive bodybuilding perspective, because you kind of said you see it more in the gyms, but never at meets.
Yeah.
Whereas with bodybuilding, you see a lot more egos in the master classes at shows than you do in the gyms. Very rarely are you going to go to your local retro fitness or crunch, and find somebody who's kind of 35 or 40, 45 and over that are actually competitive bodybuilders. It's just, it's, that audience now is just more that 18 to 25. But at these shows, man, these guys want to come up to you and be like, hey, you look great, but here's what you could have done different. And it's like, I haven't even gone on stage. Uh, it's all, look, listen, knock on wood. I've always brought very good packages to the stage. I've always been very proud of the results. But you see it happen at every show, if not to you, to somebody else, and you overhear the conversations. These guys are, listen, in the OCB, in a natural organization, you're going to get a much leaner conditioned look, always does better. That's just how the judging criteria is. I've seen it in Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, Maryland, basically this whole East Coast. Condition wins. It's not always going to be size and symmetry. So you're seeing these bodybuilders in a master's class. I'm really going to narrow focus here. So natural organization,
Sure.
master's class of 35, 40, 45 and over. Bodybuilding, these guys are getting on stage at like 142 pounds, 150 pounds. Because obviously their muscle density is diminished. They can't put on weight like they used to in their 20s and early 30s. And they're trying to give you critiques on how you can be more conditioned, on how you should be fuller, like I was back in the 80s and 90s. And it's just like, man, first of all, the judging criteria is insanity and needs to be revamped. That's a whole different episode for us. I'm sure you see people win shows left and right, or win at meets and stuff, and there's some controversy surrounding every sport that we're all in. But dude, the masters classes in bodybuilding, and it's kind of funny because we haven't really run across this yet, where we're both kind of in similar worlds, but we see things way differently, whereas in this is a good instance. I mean, yeah, the masters classes are brutal, and I think it translates to those commercial gym every day, 7 day a week goers who are there at either 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, thinking they're the mayor, all the way up to the guys who come in at 6 o'clock just to kind of walk around and talk to people about how awesome they used to be.
No, that's like I said, that's the one thing I'll say that's pretty good about the powerlifting community. I mean, granted, like I have very small experience with the bodybuilding side of it. I mean, other than like like going to like professional shows, but obviously like you can't compare the 90% of what bodybuilding is, which is like the local and national level, to like the IFBB level,
100%.
because that's obviously that's different. But with powerlifting, like the community is relatively very supportive. I mean, again, you have like the outliers and the know-it-alls, and you're gonna have that everywhere. But like it's very, very supportive, and the masters, like 1, 2, and 3 classes and everything, like they're actually very stacked. Like just from what I've seen in the small amount of bodybuilding shows I've been to, is it's not going to be like this, 2-man masters show where they're both kind of like bouncing off of like, their heyday.
Yeah.
You'll actually have these like 10-person deep masters classes where like people are fighting for like world team spots, and, like very, very strong and like supportive, and like they'll be the first person who, like, if you're out like pulling for the win on a last deadlift, they'll be the first person like out on the platform like
That's
cheering you
awesome.
and everything. So I think that's like the difference. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's just the biggest thing I've noticed is kind of what you were mentioning with like people being very territorial about their old ways and whatnot, it kind of sometimes comes off as like clicky. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good word for it.
Yeah, and I think, you touch on a good point, and to kind of bring this conversation full circle,
Yeah.
it's kind of that need to either be involved or not be involved.
Yeah.
How involved do you want to be in your sport of choice? And
Mhm.
sometimes it may not come off as good support or as quality support.
Yeah.
Um, and you find yourself, let's talking about these kind of new gym goers, and to the point of just kind of coming up, and there's an expectation, and I'm only 22, but I know what I'm doing, and you
Mhm.
always hear the like, I know my body. Or in bodybuilding, or excuse me, in powerlifting, it's like, listen, I know what my squat is. I've hit 405 for 3 reps. I can go right to 455 for at least one. It's like, where are your numbers at? Where are you coming up with this? Um, and I think, to my point, the reason you and I do this, and I really hope it's the reason a lot of people do this, is whether I have 20 subscribers or 2,000, or I get 5 likes or 500, we live in kind of a day and age with fitness and in the gym where you can't just go up to people and try to help them anymore. Because that's the first thing they're going to ask is like, hey man, I don't really need your help. I've seen your social media. You have 200 followers. I have 5,000. I'm just doing this for them. Whereas back in the day, it's like if somebody was going to give us advice. I was talking about doing the shoulder presses, man, and I kind of feel like that's one movement I've never done wrong since, because I had that one experience.
Yep.
Um, the reason we do this is because the demographic today in our gyms do not want this information, at least not face to face. They don't want you to come up to them and critique them, to
Not at
help
all.
them, to try to point them in the right direction. They want to see, okay, listen, I don't want to hear you. I'm just going to find your social media and see everything, I need to know from there. And that's kind of me personally. That's why I do this, because again, local gyms just frustrate me. And I see these people doing things wrong, and I'm like, you know what? Hopefully one day they stumble across an influencer or an IFBB pro or whatever sport they're trying to get in. They find that athlete that motivates them and that pushes them and that they want to follow, and they can learn a thing or two, because they're just getting a lot of things wrong.
No, I agree. And like that's what I hope the good comes from a lot of the again, I like to emphasize like the lower barrier of entry to like the fitness influencing and information space because there's a lot of good information out there. And I think it's really cool that like, you don't have to have someone spend 5 years figuring things out for themselves. Like you can have some really good valuable information about nutrition and training right out of the jump. So like within a couple months you can figure out so many different things with your body. It's just I I like that side of it and I'm hoping that more people tend to like help that side of it grow more.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for like anybody who watches this, like, I mean, obviously, people can ask us through our social media platforms or on here, and
Mhm.
always feel free to reach out to us. We always try to share as much information as we can. But dude, ask questions. Ask those people who you see in the gym. If somebody's doing something impressive, there's a really good chance that they learned that from somebody else before applying it, to their own program. So go
Agree.
out, ask questions. Don't be afraid of what is social media going to think, or what's this person going to think of me? Are they going to think I don't know what I'm doing, or this, that, and the other? It's okay not to know. If
Mhm.
you're 18 years old and you just signed up for a local gym, don't look at the guys who have been there, done that, or the girls like they're
Mhm.
assholes for like, oh, this guy's walking around in a hoodie without his headphones on. He must be a mean old man. Like, no, that's the guy you want advice from.
Yep. I agree. I agree
So,
completely.
all right, man. Listen, this is an awesome place to wrap it up. I think we touched on a lot of good things today. Kind of the epitome of this episode was stop doing the wrong shit in the gym. Uh,
I think it's
Yeah, man. I appreciate it as always, and thank you, and thank everybody for watching, for stopping by the framework.
yeah. See you next week.
Where am I? Dude, you had Luna as your name the whole time.